Mike Wilbon, who he knew worked for the Washington Post since he watched them every day on Pardon the Interruption. Stevie wanted to really impress the judges with his reporting skills, so he called the main number at the Daily News and asked to speak to Dick Girardi. To his delight, Girardi called him back the next day, and when he explained that he wanted to write a story about the Palestra, Girardi gave him the names and phone numbers for all the local SIDs, short for Sports Information Director, who could help him with his story. Sean May, the SID, Stevie liked using the term, it made him feel like a pro, at Penn, had given him a press credential to cover the Penn-Columbia game. Stevie and his dad had gone to the Palestra 1,000,000 times before, but this time his dad was in the bleachers and Stevie was on press row. He decided that night, even before sitting down to write the story, that this was definitely what he wanted to do when he grew up. Get paid to have the best seats at a basketball game? Get to talk to the players and interview Coach Fran Dunphy? Have someone bring statistics to your seat at every time out? Eat for free in the press room before the game? Dad, why would anyone want to do anything else? His father, who worked in a large law firm downtown, nodded. I've thought about that more than once myself, he said. Of course, you know sports writers don't make very much money. Kornheiser and Wilbon do, Stevie answered. Lupica does. That's 3 out of thousands, his dad answered, and they only make money because they're on TV. He had a point. But still, if you could get paid at all to go to games and have the best seats in the house, you were pretty lucky. Stevie spent hours putting together his story, making the Palestra the feature rather than the game. He poured 10 years' worth of avid fandom into his writing, and when he was finished, he had almost 3,000 words. The contest rules said no more than 1,000. Cutting 2/3 of what he had written was painful, but he thought the end result was pretty strong. He sent the story in just before the January 15th deadline and waited, hoping against hope he might win. Now he had to wait until his father came home to make it official. Naturally, he was late. It was almost 7 by the time he heard the car pull into the garage. Stevie was waiting for him, letter in hand, when his dad walked inside. Nice to see you too, he said as Stevie thrust the letter at him without saying hello. But then he started to read. Wow, he said. Stevie, that's great. I'm so proud of you. So I can go, he said. What did your mother say? She said, I can go if you can go with me. Dad smiled. I think that could be arranged. I'm sure I could scalp a ticket down there if I had to. Scalp what? Mom said, walking into the room. A ticket to get into the Final Four, Dad said, waving the letter. What about work for you and school for Stevie? Hon, this is a once-in-a-lifetime chance. Plus, he earned it by winning the contest. I really think he'll learn a lot from the trip. She smiled. Uh-huh. And clearly you won't mind going either. Not even a little bit. And so it was settled. But Stevie knew his dad was wrong about one thing. This would not be a once-in-a-lifetime experience. For him, it would be a first-in-a-lifetime experience. He would see to that. If Stevie had been in charge, he and his dad would have flown to New Orleans on the first flight available on Thursday morning. That would have given them all afternoon to hang out at the coach's hotel. The coach's hotel? What in the world is that? His father asked when Stevie broached the idea. All the basketball coaches in the world go to the Final Four, Stevie said. It's like a convention or something. And there's this one hotel where they all stay and hang out. I mean, except for the 4 whose teams are playing. How do you know all this? I read it in that book you gave me for Christmas last year. I should have known. But it turned out 6:30 was the earliest his dad could get away. They had connected in Atlanta and arrived at the hotel a few minutes after 11, which with the time change meant it was after midnight on Stevie's body clock. Still, when he and his dad walked into the sparkling lobby of the Hyatt Regency New Orleans, he forgot how tired he was. A large sign just inside the door said, Welcome Final Four Media. Proud and still a little amazed, Stevie thought to himself, that's me. They made their way to the front desk to check in. There was only one person working, and the man ahead of them was engaged in a loud argument with that person. Look, I've been in the car for 14 hours today, Stevie heard the man say. I really don't need this. I know my reservation was for a suite. I don't want one of those tiny little rooms you give to people. I didn't come here to spend 4 days sleeping in a closet. Sir, this is a king-size room. And as I said, if we can upgrade you tomorrow, we will. You can speak to the manager about the confusion in your reservation in the morning." "Confusion?" the man shouted. "There's no confusion. You screwed up. This is outrageous. I mean, don't you have any idea who I am?" Suddenly, Stevie knew exactly who the man was. "Dad," he hissed, "that's Tony Kornheiser." His dad smiled. "Sounds like he's having a bad night." At that moment, Kornheiser turned around and looked at them. I'm really sorry about this. They screwed up my reservation." Disgustedly, he took the key that the clerk was now handing him. "This isn't the end of this," he said to the clerk. "Have a good night," he said to Stevie and his dad as he walked towards the elevators. "You too, Mr. Kornheiser," Stevie said. "I hope the rest of the weekend gets better for you." Kornheiser stopped and smiled at Stevie. He pointed at the clerk, then at Stevie. "You see," he said, "he knows who I am." He turned and walked away. "Dad," Stevie said with a grin, "I have a feeling this is going to be the most unbelievable weekend of my life." Chapter 2. The Other Winner. Stevie was up at 7 the next morning, barely able to control his excitement. The first event on their agenda was the USBWA Awards Breakfast, where he and his co-winner, Susan Carol Anderson, would receive their plaques and meet their escorts for the weekend. According to the USBWA press release that had been waiting for them in their room, Susan Carol was from Goldsboro, North Carolina. "I just hope," he said to his father, "that she's not a Duke fan." "If she's from North Carolina, she probably likes Duke or North Carolina," his dad said. Whatever. Susan Carol wasn't who he wanted to meet anyway. The USBWA would also be giving out its Player of the Year and Coach of the Year awards. Paul Hewitt, the coach at Georgia Tech, whose team had lost to Connecticut in the East Regional Final, had won the coaching award, and Raymond Felton, the great guard from North Carolina, was the Player of the Year. Since the Tar Heels had been upset by St. Joseph's in the round of 16, Felton would also be there. This was almost a perfect Final Four as far as Stevie was concerned. There was a Philadelphia team, St. Joe's. That made him happy. There was a Big East team, Connecticut. That also made him happy since the Big East was his favorite league. There was a Big Ten team, Minnesota State, which was okay with him, especially since he absolutely loved to watch Chip Graber play. If Stevie could wake up one morning and be anybody in the world, it would be Chip Graber. Graber was only 5'11", but he was, as Dick Vitale always said on TV, an absolute jet, a little guy who went past people before they knew what had happened. Chip was a senior, and his dad, Alan Graber, was his coach. That father-son storyline made MSU the media's favorite team. Stevie had read Graber might be one of the first 5 players chosen in the NBA draft in spite of his height. Some people called him Iverson without the tattoos. He was that good. Stevie had grown 3 inches in 8th grade, so he was now 5'4", short and not even close to being a jet, more like a prop plane. He'd made the 8th grade team at school, but he only got to play when the team was way ahead or way behind. "My ability in this sport," he had announced to his dad after a game in which he had never moved off the bench, "is limited to knowing the difference between a good player and a bad player," which puts you ahead of quite a few people, his father pointed out. The only team that had made it to New Orleans that bothered Stevie was Duke, the dreaded Blue Devils, who always seemed to be in the Final Four, or close to it. Every time he turned on ESPN, it seemed as if Dick Vitale or someone else was yelling about how great Duke was and how Mike Krzyzewski was the most wonderful coach and the best person who had ever lived. Yick. Okay, he was a pretty good coach, 10 Final Fours, 3 national titles. But there was something really annoying about a team that almost never lost. And Duke always got the calls from the referees, especially when they played Maryland. And Maryland was Stevie's favorite ACC team. Stevie had hoped against hope that Villanova would beat Duke in the Sweet 16, but it hadn't happened. Then Duke had come from 13 points down in the regional final to beat Louisville. Now Duke was slated to play Connecticut in a second game on Saturday after Minnesota and St. Joseph's faced off in the first game. The winners of those games would play for the national championship on Monday night. Getting off the elevator for breakfast, Stevie spotted someone wearing a button that said ABD on it. "Hey," he said, "what team is that?" The woman wearing the button smiled at him and said, "It means anybody but Duke." "I want one of those," Stevie said to his dad as they walked toward the ballroom. "Might blow your unbiased reporter image, don't you think? I'll wear it inside my shirt."